Hello to everybody. We just wait 1 second so that everybody comes inside. Let's see if we're a good group of people today. So, good morning. Just a few more words before starting officially this webinar. It's nice to have you here again. Thanks for being with us with this new Palladio Reloaded series. I really appreciate you take your time to come here and talk about Palladio and architecture and the stone. It's a nice and different way to stay in contact. Those who don't know me, my name is Maria Vittoria Grassi, and I'm one of the owners of Grassi Pietre, and we're a stone company, and we're based in Italy. I am talking from our showroom in Nanto, in our headquarters, and I'm in our showroom. Hopefully, sooner or later, you will be able to come here and personally see it here in Italy. Let me just introduce you to Giacomo. Giacomo, where are you? Okay, hi. He's the mastermind behind all these webinar series. And also, I now give the word to Giorgio Valentini, which is actually on the other side of the ocean. Giorgio, you will lead the discussion, so up to you.
Thank you, Maria Vittoria. I hope you're hearing me correctly. I share my screen. I don't know if you can see that. Can you confirm that you have my screen in front of you?
Yes.
Beautiful. So, you know, I always like to ask, where are you guys from? I saw there's somebody from Nova Scotia in Canada. If you can put in the chat your location, I will really appreciate it. Other than that, let me give you a few introduction on the presentation and the topics and the idea we had. It's been a while since we talked about Palladio, and I think I don't know if it's my audio, but I hear some audio coming back. So if you can mute everybody else, Maria Vittoria, maybe including yourself. Thank you. So it's been a while we talk about Palladio, and I think in last year we basically analyzed everything inside out, including his friends and brother and sisters. We kind of ran out of idea on Palladio probably, but a good approach was what we did in this event, I think, where Giacomo really came out with a great idea of showing the what we call the Floor of La Serenissima, because we will be primarily in Venice. And for those of you that were here last year, remember that Palladio worked primarily in Vicenza, not that much in Venice, except for a few churches. We'll see the floors, and you know, you will tell me what you think and you know, your ideas. Hopefully, there are some questions that came out and some interpretation of the same floor from famous architect of you know, the past centuries, and some of the newer one like Carlo Scarpa. And at the end is going to be our interpretation of the same idea. So talking about Palladio, let me just move the screen away. And of course, the phone is calling at the right time, the wrong time. Well, we know that Palladio was in the 1500, 1508 until 1580. And he was famous for the 4 books of architecture. Here is one of the examples, or actually the image. And a lot of connection, like we saw, especially the one on Jefferson between the US and Palladio. I mean, he had a great influence on the architecture. That's why we used him in most of our webinars. He was, of course, famous for La Rotonda. We spoke about that in the 12th seminar, where we talk about Palladio and the builder, and also in Sailing Along the Canal, where we talk about all his villas. Here is an image of the Basilica Palladiana, so definitely was one of his masterpieces. And I think we touched this in every single webinar we did. Is right in the center of Vicenza. Is a great place to go if you are a tourist, and even if you are not interested in architecture, there's a great bar on the top that you can get a great view of the city. But certainly is worth, from an architectural perspective, seeing all the aspects. And here is a slide which will show that Palladio did mention quite a few his techniques in flooring and how to apply different kind of technique to Florence. is definitely famous for the Palladiana, which I will touch at the end of this presentation, because in Venice, the preferred way was to do seminato or to do mosaic, which was a much more sophisticated way of and more luxurious way of showcasing the floor. But also there were some advantages in using, so some logistical aspects. So let's start from San Marco Square. It's probably the most famous square, and definitely this is not a mosaic. This is a regular tiling situation. Has been tiled between the 9th and then again centuries, and again in the 16th centuries. Is trachyte, which is a volcanic material that is quarried near Padova, so right by our quarries. And you remember that this area has a lot of volcanic activities, and that's why this material has volcanic. And the other one is giallo d'Istria. So you will see these two trachyte here and the giallo d'Istria on the bottom. Although it's called giallo, which means yellow, is actually more of a grayish tone. Then the square was also retiled in 1723 from a design, which is what we see today, of Andrea Tirali. And it was actually raised 1 meter above the original level, which I'm not sure how they did it, most likely for the high tide situation. So here is another view of San Marco Square. And from here on, we will enter primarily into churches, because, of course, the most elaborate floors are inside it, and the people that can really afford more than anybody else were the ecclesiastic communities. So here we are in San Marco Basilica, in the church, and was erected in 1071, but then got many alterations throughout its histories. This medallion is right at the entrance and denotes a motif of concentric circles and diamonds. And we call this opus sectiles, and the other one is opus tessellatum. So a brief description, tessellatums, the word says, are small tesserae, or means insert. These will be the tesserae, and is typical of the mosaic. But there's also some the larger ones, which are the majority, the biggest part of these drawings is the different kind. This was by Paolo Doni. Paolo Doni was one of the most famous mosaicists of the time in Italy. Although it was from Florence, he became very famous pretty much everywhere, and he worked anywhere it was necessary to do mosaic, basically. This is the example of the material, and we see it was realized with Biancone di Trani, which is all the way from the south of Italy, Rossasiago, which is nearby, and Nero di Seo. So all these two materials are from the north side of Italy, and Giacomo is showing you a couple of examples. I don't know if you can see it in his camera, of the three materials. So these are great marble, very available also nowadays. And because of the chromatic, you can play pretty well with many of them. Here we see another medallions, and you can see here the variety of different stones. This is a dodecaderon from the 1425 until the 1430, so about 5 years they did to create this one, and is situated in the presbytery. And because of the size of this is an opus sectile. We'll see another one here, which is in the south transept, and you can see the combination here. We also have lapis lazuli, which is the blue marble over here. And again, I don't know if Giacomo is showing. I can't really pay too much attention on his screens. But like I said, we are in the south transept. These are all concentric bands delimited by the sectile triangles. Um, Consider that all these floors, being the basilica, are from the 1000 and the 1500s, and they often get submerged in water by the high tide. I don't know, probably 4 or 5 times a year, and this has been going on for 1,000 years. So this proved the great durability of this material, and how beautiful this material effects creates to the floor. We'll see here more of a carpet area and gain in Opus Tessellatum. And here we are still inside the church, in the chapel of Madonna Nicopeia. The church has different sections inside. And this is made of porphyries, lapislazuli, malachite, and chalcedony. I don't know if I have the right pronunciation of this word, and I don't typically use this in my everyday activities. Definitely here is a combination also of different materials. I don't know if Giacomo give you the chance to show to present them. The other important aspects is that the decoration of the floors, especially back at the time, sort of wants to imitate what was possible for the walls. So it tried to reproduce what was done on the walls and on the paintings. And that another famous aspect is the stucco veneziano, which is, so as here we have battuto veneziano, or we have the tessellatum. Here we are in the north aisles, and is a peacock, which is a sort of a life element. And the peacock usually is symbolize the immortality of the soul, is a Christian symbol, although perhaps it's even pagan. Back then there was a sort of intertwine of religions and many situations. I mean, Venice was a very trading republic, so we're very open and doing business with everybody. Although we are coming back from the medieval time, where the church was, imposing a lot of its constraint. Definitely the Serenissima was breaking away from those strong rules. Often is also seen with vine or with other peacock. Here is another Opus Tessellatum, and these are 2 rooks carrying the fox. And remember that the mosaics were also a way of talking to the people. Not everybody could read back then. So the mosaic was a way of showing with image and symbols what we want to say to to the population. And here is called the burial of the fox, and it's kind of 2 meaning. One is never trust your enemy, and actually this is the meaning, but it's sort of a 2 different way of reading this. One could be that the fox, which we don't really know whether it's dead or alive, and this is one of the interpretations. So if you are I don't know how you call it, a rook, I think is the rooster, sorry. If you are a rooster, don't carry the fox in, with all the hands, because of course it's going to make a feast if it's still alive. So that's why I don't trust the enemy, because he might still be alive. And also, the interpretation would be the 2 roosters, the church, and which is, of course, the fox symbolized the evil, so the victory of the church over the evil. But there's also the rooster are the emblem of France. So the 2 kings of France, Charles VIII and Louis XII, carrying away Ludovicus IV, which was the Duke of Milan and was nicknamed the Fox. And back then, Milan was a huge enemy of Venice. There were 2 different republics fighting over territory in inland. Changing church, we are going in the Chiesa dei Santi Maria and Donato. We are on the island of Murano, and we'll see here another example of opus sectile and the tessellatum both combined, because you see the tessellatum. And also here, this inscription here. So we start seeing more, first of all, a date of when this was done and built, and sometimes also the reason why it was done. Here, of course, was in the name of Jesus Christ. And this is a little bit more unique because, you know, chess, we don't really know why here. Certainly was an Arab game. And of course, the influence of Arab in Venice is huge, but you wouldn't put maybe a chess game into a church. Nevertheless, that's where it is. Another Middle Eastern symbol, this is Solomon's knot, pre-Christian symbol, maybe of Indo-European, the derivation. And it's also the connection between the human and the divine. Funny enough, we have the same symbols on the Apple keyboard, and I don't know what that means here. We are changing church again. Now we're going into Santa Maria della Salute, which is almost across from San Marco Square, and we are in the second half of the 17th centuries. Again, we discussed, I think, this church in the webinar 5th in Palladio in Venice, and also in religious architectures. And we can see that it's the same paving that we see in San Marco Square. So Trachite and the Giallodistrias. The Giallodistria is the white, whitish deco, because we saw it was more of a grayish tone. And again, Giacomo is showing the samples on his screen. I assume they use the same one, probably because they used the leftover from San Marco Square. I don't know what else. We're going on the inside and in the same church. First of all, for those of you who remember, this octagonal shape was not typical of Christianity, but more of a Muslim. But nevertheless, inside, you can see that there's a lot of mosaic that we can look at that. And this is from Baldassare Longhena, the architect that created this church. Also was very much involved as an interior designer. And that's why here are the sketches of how the mosaic was installed in the floor. We're just coming off of another meeting that I had with the Grassi and the project we're doing in Boston, where we are discussing how to line up the joints with the planters and so other things. So it's interesting to have this sort of combinations. And not getting sidetracked too much. Here is another details of these churches, and you remember that Palladio was not much involved into the flooring, also because had a lot of Franciscan order, and in his projects and those kind of congregation, the attention need to be drawn to the altar, to Christ, to the church, to the cross, and not that much on the floor. But there are other churches and other floor, and definitely Santa Maria della Salute has a different perspective, where they did put a lot of emphasis on the floor. And here you can see that there's also 33 different roses that, of course, probably there's an association with the Christ years when he died. And we'll see here the huge variation of marble that Giacomo is showing on this on his screen. We'll go from, I didn't put the name here, but I believe is Broccatello, Rossosiago for sure, and Neriseo that we saw also before. The Bianco is barely seeable here, is the Bianco Carrara, and this is the Verde Alpi. So again, how much material was available in Venice back then is certainly interesting. We finish with the religious part. We'll show in some of the more residential architecture, and here we'll see another project still from Baldassare Longhena, or actually partially his. Here we are in Capesaro. Is right on the Grand Canal. Is a Baroque marble palace facing right on the water. Originally was designed by Baldassare in the mid-17th century. The construction was completed by Gian Antonio Gaspari in 1710. he also has the Caresonico, and you can see that these two buildings, well, I mean, you can't see because I don't have an example here, but for those of you that were the other ones, or you can Google Caresonico, you will see that it's very similar in terms of architecture and design. In particular for this double order of this colossal column and the colonnette that's flanking the arch-headed windows over here. And they were sort of reinterpreted as a motif also of by Jacopo Sansovino. Remember the Baldassarre Longhena creates the impression of these double loggias that extend across the Grand Canal. And this is, you know, surmounting this bold rusticated basement that's giving you this massive dimension of the building. Today is the 11th museum that is run by the foundation, the Musei Civici di Venezia, and this is the interior of the museum. So we want to start to show, you know, the building, but the importance of what we're talking in this seminar is the webinar actually is the flooring. And you see that we are now stepping away from mosaic and the small insert. Here we use primarily large tiles. Another aspect I want to discuss, you know, I want to point about these buildings. There are, you know, Baldassarre Longhena lived from the 1652 until 58, actually work 52 to 58. And then Antonio Gaspari took over 1703 and finished 1710. So there's been span of time and two change of architect. The client died. So there's been a lot of vicissitudes on this building, and also a lot of budget adjustment. And this is probably one of the main reasons, you know, floor is typically the last part of the building that comes into being made. And like anybody on this project, budget is tight. Once you get to the end, you don't really have what you were hoping for. And this is one of those cases. So the reason why they went for this large tile was primarily to save on labor and material cost. So this is the reason why it's not typical floor that we normally see. Here is the details, and you can see it's primarily made with Rosso Verona and Bianco Asiago, Biancone. Two very affordable and very available material in this area. Then we are going to another particular, and there's a nice anecdote here about Venice. This is a residential palace, and we will see inside a particular way of flooring, which is the famous one, the Terrazzo Veneziano. But I want to give you a little bit of a background on the building. This is Casin Detto del Baffo. Started in the 18th century, and the floor, the 1730s in terrazzo, is Tecnica of Seminato. The technique is Seminato, which I think it should be translated terrazzo or Venetian flooring. Now, I don't want to go too much into this detail here because, I mean, if there's an old school architect or installer in the audience, you can probably get me off guard. And there's many different variations of doing this floor. So if there's any question, probably it's best to discuss it, you know, privately. Maybe you text Giacomo and he can respond, or you know, through email later on. But this is the floor that we'll see inside this house, and you can see there is all small inserts. First of all, you will also see here the date, which is very important. And also in, you know, this is the 1730. To, you know, date the building, date the construction, and the floor decoration here is characterized by circular figures. One of these is 4x22 black diamond shaped spatula. Seminato Veneziano is also considered a recycling techniques. Again, we try to save as much as we can, and also was a way of making floor that was logistically possible. Remember that these houses are, in the middle of the lagoon, and not all of the canal are very wide, like we saw in the previous building, where you are in the Grand Canal. You can probably afford to bring in large planks or large tiles. But many of these houses, and this house in particular that I'll show in the next slide, you will see is right in the center. So also how to get the labor, the material from the boats to the flooring is difficult. And certainly using small tile or small inserts is making that a little bit more affordable and easier. Here we are in Casino Venier, or Casino, the way it should be said. And this is actually where the word casino comes from. Casino, first of all, is situated in between Rialto Bridge and San Marco Square in the Rione Merceria. We'll see here the inside of the house. And you can see that this is more, casino means small house. Or ridotto, this is another name that translated will reduce, but the actual meaning in Venetian would be to go to. And this is giving you a good idea of what these places were for. First of all, they were small but welcoming, intimate places where friends could meet after they went to theater to discuss the performance and to have a drinks and relax and enjoy. And this is where the word casino and casino is having this leisure and social activity. And there were many in Venice since the 16th centuries, but it actually got momentum in the 18th centuries. And this really achieved a great success. And there were 118 of them. Almost all of them around San Marco Square, because that's where the performance were, that's where all the people were meeting. So like I said, they were primarily meeting places for entertain and sometimes debauchery, even a real literary room, where you can discuss and philosophize over what you saw. But they were also gambling places. And again, that's the reason. Dancing places where you can have romantic or secret encounters. Any possible excuse to have fun. You remember that Venice back then was rich and full of life. And of course, when there's money, there's power. A lot of people came from France also coming from France to explain the new philosophy that was there. Venice was also an avant-garde in the craftsman of the glasses, so a lot of different techniques. And anywhere you see money, sex, and interesting and innovation, there's also spies. And you can see here that they were actually spying on these houses also. But then, besides this anecdote, we'll see, going back to the floor, again, an example of how to use sort of a mosaic tile here, again, because we need to use a small material. Here is Rosso Verona, we saw it before. Carrara is the white one, and the Bardiglio, sort of the bluish. And this is pretty much the end of the historical part. We jumped 200 years later. In these 200 years, we went through the Habsburg's domination, so there's really not much interesting going on. And here we are in the 1958. This is the Olivetti shops in San Marco Square. Is floor and the stairs designed by Carlo Scarpa, a very famous architect. So it's certainly worth noting, and notice how Scarpa used and adapted the same technique that was available in the in the previous era we just saw. Here are other example of red glass, tesseras irregularly set in bed, or cement mortars. There's different way of doing these flooring techniques. Here we are on the foundation Querini Stampalia, 1961-1963. Is still a masterpiece of Scarpa. And here I want to show you the ingenuity, I mean, the creativity, sorry, not the ingenuity. I'm reading some of my notes in Italian, and the translation sometimes is making you false friends. Of how to make use of the spaces and considering the environment. You can see here the high tide, and you can see that you can still use at least part of it, considering that the building is flooded. And also how to use the reflex of the lights, which is typical of Venice, where the sunlight reflects in the canals. So you're having also light coming from underneath that is all in this city. And this definitely make use of that in its architecture. This is another original floor, same building of Carlo Scarpa. We're again using different marble here. We have again the Rosso Verona, the Verde Alpi, Carrara, and also here we have the Rosso Lepanto, this one down here. Next, we are going to Palazzo Remmer. We are again on the Grand Canal. We are at the beginning of the 15th century. It was restored in 1985 by Paolo Riva. And here you can see the flooring. It's a little bit of the reflection, barely see. It seems like a monolithic piece. But once I show you the details, this is the way it was done. Ansier terrazzo technique. The floor really represents these different board bands and triangulars and square element, some in Lasa marble and marble chips mixed with cement. Lasa marble comes from the Alps on the border with Austria. And this is the end of the building in Venice. We jump to Vicenza. Here we are in Chiesa Santa Corona. Again, we have the opus setile, which is marble carved to create geometrics or motifs here, very details. You can see better here how crisp is the definition. Here we see the Last Supper engraved in marble by hands, and this is definitely opus setiles. Another one here is the opus stellatum, very used since the Romans, and this is what is considered the mosaic nowadays, but not that much in the Venetian and the Palladian era. This is an opus signinum, which is a different technique. Here is the technique of coccio pesto, where the marble insert and stone are actually pushed and pressed down into a clay or cementitious paste, but primarily clay, and then sprayed or actually scraped in a way that it comes completely flush. So it's a different technique from the battuto veneziano. And last but not least, we have to go to the Palladiana, where is the use of larger, these are actually a pretty small one, but in traditional Palladiana, we also see planks and pieces as big as 12 inches about a foot. And the primary, this was kind of invented by Palladio, and the creativity of Palladio was to use this technique basically to save money. The idea is using scrap of material taken from leftover of job site, sometimes even from tombstones, and put it on the floor and grout it somehow with cement, and you have a decent floor that is doing its own purpose. You can clean and walk on without spending the money of the mosaic or the other techniques that we saw before. Here is, we're going in today's era, is Grassi Marmi interpretation of what we saw before. And you can see that these are this is actually the four pieces are literally highlighted here with a red marker to show how the four pieces are looking ungrouted. And on this side, you see them grouted. You know, it was barely seeable, but if you can see here, you see the joint. But I think it's a great way of creating a terrazzo battuto veneziano in today's market without going crazy. Not everybody nowadays, not all the labor have the craftsmanship of doing it, but there's a lot of demand. This more and more we notice this, the demand for this material, and not only here in the United States, I'm talking about all over the world. You know, labor is, craft labor is shorter and shorter every day. So we had to find a way to sort of industrialize in a way, but at the same time create and achieving the same example. Another one is the more typical Palladiana. This we call Alpi 4.0, is our Grigio Alpi. And you can see that we use different chunks of material. This other interpretation, we saw it in Carlos Scarpa. He was using some of this, and we created similar ideas. And I would say the last one is also this composition here. And these are just idea that we came up, and we basically marketed as, you know, finished product. But as you can see, the possibilities are endless here. And, you know, we only envision a handful because there's, you know, so many that you can market and promote and have it available. And I think with this, we kind of comprehend majority of what we've seen in the history that I showed you before. But if you guys are interested in having some custom made, you know, I hope this proves that this is possible. I want to leave with the last shot, and this is the end of the presentation, where you are seeing an actual project. I think this is in Russia, where there's a combination of everything. I mean, it's typically not the same style that I would like over here, but it's definitely very opulent and shiny. But you can see here a full tile, you can see the insert, you can see the cut to size water jet, most likely. Maybe Giacomo can explain better how this project was achieved. You can see the insert here. So anything that we show you before is actually a real realization that we've done in these houses. We have many other, but not all of these projects, especially the prestigious private projects, they ask us not to release drawings. So we don't really have that many that we can showcase. This is, you know, a wrap up in 40 minutes. I was sort of into my goal, and it's pretty much what I have to say for this presentation. And so I will open to the floor. If there's any question, if anything that you want us to go over, all for you. And Maria Vittoria, if you want to mute them, I don't know if there's any question that came.
No, let me just see if I can. There's no question. I think you made a perfect job. I mean, it's. I was just going back. If I mean, I think you made a really interesting presentation. And you were so clear, and Giacomo showed a lot of materials there. And just to tell that everybody that if you have any kind of a specific question, you can just either raise your hand, there's a button under that, or just write something in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself. There's not a problem. Or in the meanwhile, otherwise, if you want to talk about something, I mean, later on, there's not a problem. There's somebody who says that thank you, was always so interesting and nice to see you all. Well, of course, for us, it's the only way, you know, to keep in contact, because right now we're still bounded here in Italy. But it will soon end, so I hope I can just move again like in the past. Me and Giacomo, I think both of us are tired of staying here. I just think that, you know, we are open to any specific question or specific project that you want to discuss. If you have any question about terrazzo, about Veneziana, or about stone or marble flooring, we are here. You have our email. You have our contacts there. Stephen, who writes, it would be helpful if the terms used could be written on the slides as well, so that we can all learn the language. It's
like many times, I just don't, I mean, I put few notes, but not all of them. So I have that sort of in my head. But yeah, I mean, if there's any specific question or any terms, I believe we're going to be sharing this presentation later on. So you can just, capture one page or another and email me or Grassi, and we'll be happy to respond on that.
There's a tough question, which I think you want Giacomo to reply. That's for you. And that's what's the historical equivalent of our firm Grassi Pietra? And Giacomo, that's a good question.
Okay, I've got a question. Is Lapis still okay? What I have is in just a few words. What we have seen here in Venice is just the heritage of the Greek and Roman Empire. Okay, so the Palladiana is actually an opus incertum. A kind of mosaic can be an opus tessellatum or an opus vermicularum. If you want to discuss more, I'm available, because the list is quite long and is much more interesting. How is the technique that can bring you to the final result, if you want. Firstly, the mosaic was born just for an imitation of the painting. Can I have the screen just for a second, Giorgio?
Yeah, I stopped the presentation. I stopped sharing.
Okay. Give me a second. Can you see this?
Yep.
Yeah. This is an example what you can have in Sicily, for instance, in a villa, in a Roman villa, where you can see that the details and the design is very modern. They are called the bikini girls. This is a Roman villa. As well, we have another example. This is an unswept room. This is very important for us, a mosaic, to understand how the Romans celebrate and had parties. This is a representation of the leftovers after the party in Rome. Certainly, they don't have to clean the room after all. And this is another example. This is a mosaic. This is a mosaic probably from Sosius, was an artist from Pergamon, and this is very detailed as well. This is another example of sectile you can find in Rome. So if you want to go deeper this kind of technique, I will be happy to share what I can do with you. Thank you for being here with us.
Great. I think we have the next one on April 30. Am I correct?
I think so.
I will be presenting from Italy. Finally, I made it to travel. So next time I will be with Maria Vittoria and Giacomo in the same room, finally. I look forward to seeing all of them. It's going to be great seeing Italy after almost 9 months.
Good. It will be good to have you here, Giorgio. So thank you to everybody. As always, you will get the link where you can just re-see this webinar early next week. And if you're interested in the past webinar, of course, just to recall to your mind, in our website and in the one of Atlantic League, you can find all the past webinar. Thank you to everybody, and see you so in more or less a few weeks from now. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.